Welcome to Cybersecurity Awareness TV, episode 382. I'm your host, Mac Jackson Jr. for January 15th, 2022. I'm a cybersecurity consultant and researcher, and if this is the first time you've heard our show, folks, I'm here to provide you information on cybersecurity awareness news, expert interviews, and tips on how to protect yourself from the fastest growing crimes of the 21st century, and that's cybersecurity, folks. If you would like to find out more information about cybersecurity awareness, you can go to my website, and that's at macjacksonjr.com. That's macjacksonjr.com, and find out information about cybersecurity awareness, and also developing policies for your companies. You can go to vandersoncybergroup.com. That's vandersoncybergroup.com, where you find out information on cybersecurity awareness to protect your business and yourself and your family, folks, from these cybersecurity scammers and criminals that are out there. In today's episode, we're going to talk about cybersecurity trends that are happening in 2022, things that you should be aware of, things to protect your business and your family from these types of cyber threats. In our segment, we will also continue our discussions with cybersecurity awareness discussions relating to ransomware and ransomware awareness. And then our third segment, like we do every week, we'll talk about things you can do to protect yourself from cybersecurity incidents and for your family and your business. And also with my guest today, I have a powerhouse with me today to talk about cybersecurity. And you'll be able to join us here after these messages, folks. So definitely stay tuned.
According to the FBI, 97% of retailers have been hacked by cyber attacks. 97%. Train your staff on the new red flag rules to mitigate identity theft. Plus, protect your customers and employee data and develop an identity theft prevention policy for your business. Learn how to detect and report a cyber attack to your customers and protect your company's image from a cyber attack. Identity theft is the fastest growing crime of the 21st century, but there is something you can do. Contact MJ Computer Concepts at 702-868-0808. Don't become a statistic. Call MJ Computer Concepts at 702-868-0808.
Hi, welcome back to Cybersecurity Awareness TV. I'm your host, Mac Jackson Jr. Again, if it's the first time you're seeing our show, this show is about cybersecurity news, tips, and interviews with security experts on how to protect yourself from the fastest growing crimes of the 21st century. And folks, I'm really excited today. I have a guest host with me today. We're going to talk about cybersecurity trends for 2022. Stephanie Benoit, Kurtz, how you doing?
Thank you for having me.
We have been friends for a long time now, and we're in the industry together. Stephanie also has over 20 years experience and more relating to computers and cybersecurity. She's also one of the lead instructors for the University of Phoenix, correct? As well, and she's also a consultant, independent consultant as well in cybersecurity for businesses and industry. So Stephanie, we're going to talk today about what's going on in 2022. Happy New Year to you, by the way. It's still not too late to say that, right? We still say it until, what is it, 15th? Today is the last day we could say Happy New Year.
Absolutely. Well, Happy New Year to you as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
And certainly, you know, cybersecurity is something that's on everybody's mind, whether it's individuals or businesses, surrounding how they're vulnerable and how the bad actors continue to create problems and challenges for companies and individuals all over the world. And whether you're a small business or a large enterprise organization, those continued attacks and the sophistication of the attacks continue to increase. And so having a layered defense strategy, whether that's your individual layered defense strategy as an individual person and how you protect your assets and your identity at home, or a layered defense strategy as an organization because you're an enterprise organization, a Fortune 100, a Fortune 50 company, really pretty all the same now because the bad actors aren't differentiating really between organizations and individuals.
That's right.
Because they can monetize different types of things, even from you as an individual, that create not only challenges for you, but able to monetize for themselves as well.
Absolutely. We've talked about that in the show, that how hackers are always looking for low-hanging fruits first, their first groups to go after low-hanging fruit. And those are usually individuals. But where the money is, that's in the business area. And hackers are looking to, if they can extort and capture businesses by using some sort of malware or intrusion, that's where they can get the bulk of their change from.
Well, and absolutely, because what they're looking for is a way to monetize whatever activity that they're doing. And so when we look at Gartner, for example, they're an organization that's an industry analyst. They do a lot of different research in the industry, and they're talking that by 2025, more than 75% of organizations will have been breached somehow by a bad actor. And so when you think about that, that breach can occur in something as easy as just a virus, but generally it's exfiltration of data, and it's customer data. They're stealing customers' names, phone numbers, social security numbers, credit card data, even healthcare information.
That's right.
And so when we think about that, that's pretty startling, because it's really changing the way that businesses need to think about not only what do they collect from their customers, but then how do they secure it.
Right. We were talking about that a little earlier today. You were mentioning there was a big cyber attack here in Vegas. Well, they're all over the world, but especially here in Las Vegas with, is it Dottie's we're talking about? Yeah. And again, it's part of being a part of the membership organizations, right? If you're a part of an organization that collects data for your players or for your customers, and you have your information in the cloud, that information can be vulnerable to all types of cyber attacks, right?
Absolutely. So when we look at loyalty programs, whether it's Dottie's or any of the casino gaming organizations, or even, believe it or not, grocery stores where you have loyalty programs. Good point. Yeah. You're tracking information like the customer's name, address, phone number, also then potentially other identifiable information, or what's called PII, personal identifiable information, that then the bad actors can somehow sell online and monetize. So how some of these organizations, whether it be Dottie's or others, find out is that list shows up online for sale on the dark web, where the organizations that have exfiltrated that data and taken it have stolen it, and now they're selling it to other bad actors on the dark web. And so that's one of the ways that they use to monetize, is they exfiltrate the data. But another way that's been very common as of late, above just viruses like WannaCry and those kind of things, is ransomware. Yes. And those ransomware attacks are accelerating in complexity and how they occur. And so those ransomware attacks are where they get into your network, exfiltrate some data, and then they start encrypting everything and locking it down. And so you're unable to function until you either pay the ransom or restore clean backups. And what's interesting about a lot of these different organizations now is these cyber crime groups, because it's like organized crime at this point, actually get to your backups first. They make sure that they destroy the ability to back up.
That's right.
And then they lock down your environment, so you have nothing to restore that's clean, which leaves your organization in a situation where you either start over or you pay the ransom. And so when the FBI and other government organizations say, well, we really don't want organizations to pay the fine, companies find themselves in a very difficult situation at the point that their backups are no longer viable and have been compromised. Then the challenge is, do I totally restart my systems from scratch, which is I completely rebuild my systems, or do I pay the ransom and try to get back to working as normal?
True. And the next step, what they'll do is, a lot of companies who refuse to pay the ransom, the bad guys then say, okay, great, we'll just take your data and we'll sell it in the darknet and make money that way. So if they can't get money from you directly, they'll sell your data in the darknet, and then another bad guy will get your data, and then they'll go ahead and extort and expose that data out to all the PII they can get from it.
Well, and the interesting thing is just because you pay the ransom doesn't mean you're free and clear.
Absolutely.
It also doesn't mean that you've removed those bad actors from your network, or that they still don't have the ability to encrypt data or create other types of challenges. And so what some organizations are starting to see is they've experienced the first ransomware attack. They paid the ransom, and now those bad actors are coming back for round two.
Yeah, try again.
And so the challenge around that is by paying the ransom, it's still giving the bad actors a way to monetize that bad behavior. And that's really what they're looking for, is a way to be able to monetize the behavior that they've created, and where it makes the most sense because it makes money for them.
Absolutely. And this type of monetization, these bad guys look after can start from your smartphone. It doesn't necessarily have to be your laptop or desktop, folks. You can also have ransomware on your smart devices where they're asking for anywhere from $500 to get your data back and more.
Well, and the interesting thing is, as we look at different types of trends, so DNS security, for example, is one of the trends in 2022 that we're starting to see, is that IDC had reported that attacks to DNS, or domain name services, rose 87% last year. And so when we think about that, think about domain name services as kind of, for some of us, the phone book to the internet. It's a way that you attach names and addresses and locations. So this is how computers know who they are and where they are, and how you, when you search on the web, can actually find a location. And so if your domain name services have been compromised as an organization, your internal organization might not be able to locate their software, might not be able to locate servers, might not be able to locate different cloud types of resources, and your customers might not be able to find your website, may not be able to find your payment portal, might not be able to create that reservation, for example, on your site because they can't find it. Another very popular one is API security.
API security, yeah.
And so when we look at API security, as we look at the growth of everything that's happened on the web exponentially, we're looking at just huge growth around APIs and the use of those.
And for our listeners out there, we're describing what API is, the Advanced Persistent Threats. The definition of the API, for those of you who are don't know what that is, advanced persistent threats that are going on.
And so when we look at different types of communication with that and how the web works, there's just that acceleration of development opportunities and programming opportunities. So you think about what goes on the web from a DevOps perspective.
Right.
Dev operations now have become a really nice target for bad actors, because if they can get into that development operation, then they can also get into code. So when we look at what happened with the SolarWinds breach or some of the other breaches that have occurred, what we've seen is that those bad actors have gotten into code, and then that code has been pushed out by that third party as trusted code. And the challenge is that development process has been interrupted. Like
example, Log4j, right?
Exactly.
Yep, Log4j. Yeah, it's really, that has caused lots of problems for 2021 and within this year as well.
Yeah, and then when we look at certificate management, so when, for example, you go to a website through a browser and you're doing a financial transaction, you see the little lock, and that is created through a certificate. What we're also seeing is we're seeing a huge amount of compromises surrounding certificates.
Right.
Certificate management is not difficult, but it's kind of like doing your dishes.
Yes.
You have to do that regularly. You have to get it done. And what is happening is organizations aren't spending time doing due diligence, doing certificate management.
That's right.
So they let the certificate expire. And at the point that a certificate is expired on a website, that transaction then is happening, whatever that transaction is, in plain text.
Right.
And so it can be picked up by bad actors across the internet. And so the challenge is certificate management is something that the bad actors have decided to get involved in, because organizations haven't been as diligent as they need to be with doing certificate management.
That's very true.
But when we look at things that really are going to continue in 2022, with a pandemic and, as you know, with COVID, lots of organizations, and especially here in Las Vegas, were forced to go remote very quickly.
That's right, working from home.
And so you were working in the office one day in March, and literally within a week, you are now working from at home.
Exactly.
And so those remote worker threats are going to continue to be a challenge as we look into 2022. Organizations are not bringing their workforce back into the office like we expected them to here in first quarter. And we're actually seeing a trend where organizations are really trying to reevaluate, do I continue to pay for that office space and that OpEx expense where there's nobody there?
Right.
Or do we maybe give up that lease and give in to a remote workforce? And so you're really starting to see that. And then you're also seeing the workforce, for those that can work remotely, and certainly that's not all jobs, but for those that can, what you're seeing is that those individuals, those employees, are saying they prefer to work remote.
Which is really interesting. Prefer to work from home because they can spend more time with their family, especially the kids now. A lot of them are staying home because of this pandemic. So now they can spend more time with their family, but at the same time, they need to work and make money. So working from home can be a benefit, but the IT teams, they don't have at their house as they do working in a corporation, all the security mechanisms put into their routers at their houses, right? And the security procedures that they're using. So now they're vulnerable to cyber attacks that way.
Absolutely. So when we look at remote workers, because it was such a huge thrust of moving people so quickly, a lot of IT organizations didn't put the right tools in place to be able to, for example, adequately patch that laptop that went home, or adequately take care of that mobile device. And so now, fast forward a year and a half, 2 years, almost 2 years later, we're looking at this going into year 3, going, these organizations still have machines that maybe haven't been patched. Definitely aren't getting updates. No way to manage them remotely still. And so those kinds of what I call the sins of the past have to be rectified in order to create that stable layered defense strategy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really going to be an issue with companies, and they are aware of it. So that's what we're doing here in this show and other shows like us. In our writings, is letting companies know these are some things they need to be aware of, the ways they can improve their system and improve their cybersecurity posture.
Yeah, and as we look at other types of threats, we look at third-party and supply chain risks. So when we look at things like SolarWinds, Kaseya, a lot of those different breaches were created by third parties. But what we're looking at is almost 32% of organizations across the board have experienced some type of third-party breach. And that's going to continue as more organizations move to the cloud, software as a service continues to be more widely adopted. Because again, that's the third party. That's somebody else's system that you're running your business on. But the interesting thing is from a customer perspective, so when we look at the downhill progression of that, the end customer doesn't care whether that's your system or your third-party system. All they know is that their information was breached, or their data is gone, or their experience was modified by some type of a breach. And so that third-party risk is going to continue to be a real significant challenge in 2022.
Absolutely. It definitely will continue to be that way. And what you could do as a consumer is to make sure that the data that you give out to these third-party, you know what information you're giving to these third-party companies, and definitely protecting your password. We'll be talking about that in our third segment as well. But for now, Steph, we're going to take a quick break here for commercials, and we'll be back, folks, after these messages from our station. Thank you. Hi, folks. I would like to welcome Ben Bowie from MyNiceTie.com as one of our newest sponsors for Cybersecurity Awareness TV. At MyNiceTie.com, they provide and are committed to providing classy neckties for the business community. At MyNiceTie.com, their motto is Wise Up, Suit Up, and Stand Up. You can find nice ties like the one I'm wearing now at MyNiceTies.com. Hi folks, welcome back to Cybersecurity Awareness TV, and I'm here with my co-host Stephanie, and we're going to talk about ransomware attacks. All right, Stephanie, as we continue, we're talking about how ransomware has definitely exploded as a way that hackers can extort data and information from consumers.
Yeah, and so the interesting thing is organizations and a lot of individuals think that ransomware is just an organizational issue. But it's interesting because it even impacts end users. So when we look at what ransomware really is it is a way for the bad actors to deny you the ability to be able to use your systems and your data. And that can be systems on a laptop, it can be systems and applications on a phone, or it can be corporate systems. That's right. And that's clear down to payroll, financial services, websites, entire businesses can be locked down. And so, and basically what they're doing is they're encrypting the ability for you to get to a session. So it's being encrypted, and so you're unable to access that. And so when we look at different types of ransomware attacks, certainly there's mobile attacks, there's system attacks, and then there's also ransomware denial of service attacks, which they call RDDoS. So when we look at ransom denial of service attacks, what those are is a bad actor, for example, that will lock down a website that takes reservations, and they will lock it down through a denial of service, which means none of the customers can get to it. And then they only release that attack and stop attacking that site after the ransom has been paid.
Correct. And an example of that is what happened in the news media dealing with Croatia right now. going on with Russia and Ukraine, the actual war, that possible war that's going to be starting there. The government of Ukraine has stated that they've had an RDDS attack where the government websites were shut down and they were unable to have access to government information. And that could be very, very harmful, not knowing what's going on, you know. They're assuming that it was Russia that did it, and of course that's an act of war. Should they move forward and have military get involved on it, or is it from a third-party group that maybe are Russians or somewhere in the universe, right, that is trying to start this war? So it's amazing how our technology now is part of international warfare.
Well, and you make a great point. It is warfare because it's very difficult to tell, even being a professional in cybersecurity, where these attacks come from. Bad actors are very good at hiding the addresses that they're coming from, or the locations, or the geographies that they're coming through a variety of different types of ways of spoofing addresses, faking kind of the country location where the signal is coming from. And so it's very difficult to locate where these bad actors are coming from, but nonetheless, they still create those kinds of activities that are challenging for governments, government agencies, actually attacks on government agencies, whether it be ransomware denial of service or ransomware in general, definitely are on the increase. And I want to say that a couple of the different research areas that I was looking at, over 300% increase year over year, 2020 to 2021, in the amount of attacks that are occurring on government websites, government systems, and this is globally, and different types of critical infrastructure.
Amazing, absolutely amazing. And that's, folks, just the government area. Let's also talk about healthcare industry. Well,
certainly with the healthcare industry, they're very vulnerable in a variety of ways.
Absolutely.
If you think about denial of service attack in a healthcare environment, you have your patient management systems, right? But then you have all kinds of other critical monitoring systems that occur in the healthcare environment, clear down to surgeries now that are being done, robotic surgeries.
Yes, IV pumps, insulin machines,
Yeah, all of those different things that you don't really think about until you realize that those are all controlled by systems, and then those systems are rendered unusable when a ransomware attack occurs and locks down the entire system.
Absolutely. So now hospitals are challenged with this ransomware attacks. There's been several hospitals in 2021 and previous years that have been challenged with ransomware attacks that have shut down patient access, where the healthcare employees and staff members could not have access to patient care and information because of these types of ransomware attacks.
Well, and certainly that's the easy place for bad actors to focus, is to monetize. Is if you think about patient care, it's really all about the patient record and the information that the organization has about that patient. And so by locking down an Epic or a Cerner system in that healthcare environment, certainly that creates a scenario where the hospital doesn't want to get sued because they are not providing the right type of care, because they don't have access, and so they're very inspired to make those payments. And then the other challenge is just the exfiltration of that data.
Yes.
So when we look at identity theft, healthcare identity theft is actually a larger payback for bad actors, simply because when you steal somebody's credit card or their identity, you're able to get a couple $1,000s out of it. When you steal somebody's medical healthcare identity, what occurs with that is the bad actors first change the address of the person's identity that they've stolen. And then what happens is they actually sell that identity, and then medical procedures and service have been received on that identity through a third-party person that is not that identical person. And then the challenge is you, as the identity theft person for that healthcare record, don't know about it until you're actually skip traced for collections. And it was kind of interesting with some of the healthcare organizations I worked with, that's $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 later, where procedures have been done, you've been sent to collections, and those services were because your identity had actually been stolen and resold.
And it gets worse. Now you go in for a routine examination or maybe emergency, and they look at your medical records, and there's a piece of medicine or a pill or a shot that they're saying that you need, and you could be allergic to, or even fatal.
Absolutely.
Because it's in your records that you've had this particular shot, but your medical care, and you didn't have it at all, but it's in your record because someone stole it.
Well, and it's interesting because some of the healthcare organizations, I work specifically with a variety of them to do biometrics, where they've started to now capture faces, fingerprints, those kinds of things, so that they can validate the identity of who it is that they're capturing at that point in time. Because one of the things that was occurring in a couple of different areas in Phoenix, for example, was that the identity would be stolen in one place, and that person would actually shop around to different locations inside of Phoenix for a healthcare procedure. And so they would show up as Becky at this place, and Jane at this place, and Stephanie at this place. And the challenge around that was, once they started to institute photos and biometrics, they could see that the picture of Stephanie didn't match Stephanie, who is a patient at that organization. And so those kinds of things have started to occur, but the medical industry definitely going to have some changes that will come from a technology basis based on the customer record.
Interesting. Let's dive into this a little bit deeper here, this facial recognition. So on the show, we talked about facial recognition as a new PII, for personal identifiable information. But now, facial recognition, in this example here of medical, it's a benefit because it ways to make sure that you are who you say you are, but it can be also faked as well.
Well, absolutely. So when we look at bad actors who can actually get into systems, they can make changes or modifications to the picture or the facial recognition that's actually in there. The other piece is being able to, falsify additional documentation as it relates to driver's licenses and other types of
passports and all. And
those falsifications still occur, which is why you have systems now that solely do validation of government IDs, and that industry is continuing to grow as well, where you can put an ID in and it will validate whether or not it's actually a legitimate ID issued by that particular state.
Like the real ID we have here in the state of Nevada.
Exactly.
Very similar. Very similar to that. Yeah, so it's like every time we come up with a new technology to move forward in society and make it more convenient, the bad guys are always looking for vulnerabilities and a way to capture that data and extort it.
Absolutely. Well, it's all about monetizing the data and where they can do it easiest.
Absolutely. Always with something. Well, folks, as we talk with Stephanie here, there's a lot of information here that we've talked about of all the problems and issues concerning cyber crimes and cybersecurity. In our next segment, we're going to talk about things that you can do as an individual to protect yourselves from this fastest growing crime. And we'll be right back, folks, after these messages.
You can help limit the damage from identity theft with some quick responses. Placing a fraud alert on your credit reports, filing a complaint with the FTC, and then filing a police report. Taking these steps will give you some important tools to deal with other problems that may come up, like charges you didn't authorize on your credit card, phone, or utility bills, like ATM withdrawals or debit card purchases you didn't approve, like getting a letter from the IRS saying someone has filed for a tax refund in your name. Keep records of your calls and copies of documents. If these problems do come up later, you'll have the necessary tools close at hand. For more tips and tools on dealing with identity theft, visit ftc.gov/ID theft. That's ftc.gov/ID theft.
Hi folks, welcome back to Cybersecurity Awareness TV. I'm your host, Mac Jackson Jr., and here's my guest host, Stephanie Kurtz. Thank you, Stephanie. This has been really interesting, and in this segment, we're going to talk about cybersecurity tips that you can use to protect yourselves from these types of cyber threats. So we'll start from the basic one, and that's passwords.
You would be amazed how often passwords, whether it's an individual or whether it is a very skilled developer, they reuse their passwords on a variety of different accounts. They use the same password on their banking account that they use in their LinkedIn profile, that they use in my Facebook profile. The challenge with that is Facebook, LinkedIn, Yahoo, Google, all have been compromised, logins and passwords. So
that's right.
There are literally millions and hundreds of millions of logins and passwords for sale on the dark web from organizations that have been breached. And so the challenge is those are all for sale. Bad actors buy those lists, and then they use those lists to try to see if they can find your login and password at your banking institution, at other organizations where they potentially can find a way to break into that account and then monetize that break-in. And so reusing passwords, such a bad idea.
Yes, correct. And also with your, like Steph was mentioning, it's still your email addresses, and they can link that to other databases from other hackers who's broken into other systems as a way to put together, as I've said before in this show, a jigsaw puzzle of an individual and put these blocks together to create your identity, all information they can know about you, your PII or any other data.
Yeah, and so and the challenge is a lot of people will use the same password that they use for their social media,
right?
And with their checking account or banking account. Now the challenge with that is once I get into your banking account with that login and password, then I have control over your direct deposit, maybe savings accounts, maybe your kid's 529 account, maybe brokerage accounts, all kinds of different things, maybe even a 401k, where I can make changes and start moving money out, and you'll never even know I'm there unless you have what's called multi-factor authentication.
That's right, folks.
Created and set up on those accounts to know and be notified when somebody logs into those accounts.
So that's a good point, Steph. Let's talk about that multi-factor authentication, what that means for you. A lot of these websites that you go to have that multi-factor authentication, which means that there's another device that you have to authenticate your login after you enter your user ID and your password. Either a message or a code is sent to your smartphone as an SMS, or you're getting an email with a number to authenticate your entry.
Yeah, and so where that's become very useful is at least you're getting a notification about the fact that you signed on to an account so that you're aware of whether or not that was you. But the flip side of that is even what I saw yesterday on my phone was somebody texted me on my phone, we were talking about this in the parking lot, that my account at Bank of America had sent a wire transfer, and they wanted me to click on a link to validate that wire transfer.
A text message, folks. That's what you got. A text message, not an email. A text message.
Text message on my phone, and that link was a malicious link. And so the challenge with that is it's very difficult to discern real activity versus fake activity. And so when you suspect that something maybe that you've seen on your phone, whether you get a message that your account has been logged into, or you get a message like I received yesterday, go to the actual financial institution itself and contact them directly through the phone numbers and communication that they have on their website, and validate that before you click on anything. Because by clicking on that link that I received, like I said, it contained a download to my phone that could have, put in different types of technology that could then capture keyboards information, capture
keyloggers, absolutely,
logins and passwords, maybe even somehow get between the man in the middle attacks, where if I was using Google Pay or something with that phone, that it could get in the middle of those transactions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You hear that, folks? That's what Stephanie mentioned. That's a very good point, Stephanie. So you have your phone, if it's compromised and you're trying to pay for a transaction, you could have a man in the middle attack, which means that when you're at your merchant using your phone to pay for your transaction, the bad guy is also reading your authentication data, how much money you have in the bank. So when you pay for your transaction, you walk away, they can turn around and utilize it right after you. So it's very, very important that we have with this information, we understand it. But most important, Stephanie, I want to let our audience know that the information that Stephanie is sharing with you, do us a favor and tell a friend. The more people that we let know about this information, the more difficult it would be for hackers to try to take our data. So it's very important we do that.
Well, absolutely. And as you look at mobile devices, think about your mobile device. When we talk about those security tips, personally, think about your mobile device just like your laptop or just like your PC. Make sure that you have antivirus and anti-malware protection on it. Make sure that you're scanning that device regularly. Everybody laughs at me and they says, "Oh, you have antivirus on your phone?" Absolutely, I do. And I scan my phone regularly, because a phone in our mobile world today, you're going to lots of different websites, you're clicking on different links.
Yes.
You're doing all those things that just potentially at some point, it's not if, it's when.
Do you remember the movie Austin Powers?
Absolutely.
Can you remember the little person that what they call the little person? Mini-me, right? That's what your phone is, a mini-me of your desktop computer system. It's a mini-me. It's the same as a computer, folks. And it has the same vulnerabilities that your laptop, your desktop can have. So you need to make sure that you have antivirus software set up on your smart device and your smartphones. Also, if you're in coffee shops, right? Or you're at a hotel or at a friend's house, your device should also have a VPN. What do you think of the VPNs?
Absolutely VPN. And I love the fact that you talk about coffee shops and hotels and free Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi is a terrible idea. I used to manage free Wi-Fi, and basically it's a service that organizations provide, but they provide absolutely zero oversight on that.
That's right.
So there's a variety of different things that can be occurring on that free Wi-Fi. So having a virtual private network software application on your laptop, on your tablet, on your phone, great idea, because what that does is it creates a secure tunnel that your data then goes through that fixes it so that if there is somebody on that free Wi-Fi that you've jumped on, trying to look for information, that it's more difficult for them to do.
Absolutely more difficult for them to do. And yeah, that's a very good point, Stephanie. So folks, on your device right now, on your phones, check to make sure that you have these two programs, antivirus software and a VPN. Now, if you don't, you can always look in the Google Store, right? And in the Apple Store for those of you with iOS devices, and download one of the VPNs. Right now I'm not endorsing any particular one, but it's best to have something out there versus nothing. And for those of you in Nevada here, Cox Communications, they also let me know that they have I believe it's McAfee that you can get for free as a download on your devices in your home and your smartphones if you are a member with Cox Communications. So it's something you want to check into as well.
Well, and the other piece is when we talk about the password, and we'll get back to that a little bit.
Sure.
When we think about all the different accounts we have, passwording is hard. I don't know how many accounts you have, but I have literally thousands of accounts, and remembering the passwords, the joke is it's always on the Post-it note that's under the keyboard.
That's right.
It's in the little phone book that's in hard copy.
And don't we notice that as consultants, we go to a work cubicle and we'll see those little passwords, stick them everywhere of different passwords, access stuff.
In one of the prior jobs, we cleaned out an office, and I literally created a wall of Post-it notes from a prior cybersecurity director of all their little passwords on this Post-it wall. And we were just looking like that can't really happen. You're a director of cybersecurity. Right. Anyway, there's some technology ways to take care of that now. They have what's called password vaulting. And so what password vaults are is they're applications that run securely on your phone or on your PC or your laptop that are cloud-based systems that remember the logins and generate secure passwords for you.
Absolutely.
You never necessarily even know what those passwords are. Great thing is it doesn't require you to remember them. You remember the main login and password to the vault.
That's right.
The vault stores the passwords for you, and then the great thing is about that then is you're not reusing a password that you've used hundreds of times. You're not reusing the same password that you're using on your bank account or your social media account. And you have one place to keep it so that you're not necessarily trying to remember or have that Post-it note wall of shame on your wall.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right, Stephanie. These are called password management systems. And there's lots of them out there that you can utilize. But again, they will encompass all of the passwords that you'll use in your browser and also your third-party apps as well on your smart devices. And all you have to remember is one password and one user ID. And again, with your passwords, you should also have passphrases, as we were talking before. Not just a simple word. In Las Vegas, the Raiders, no, that's not a good password. But if you have a simple sentence like, for example, I love the Raiders, exclamation point, and you change the S's to dollar signs, things of that nature, it's easy for you to understand, but it makes it quite difficult for a hacker to get into. So that's an example of a passphrase. So things like that you could utilize. And in most families, households, individuals, you have your 5-year-old having access to the Wi-Fi, as well as your 85-year-old grandmother. That's definitely a lot of generations there trying to remember what passwords to use. So you think about this, having a passphrase, that's something that the whole family can understand and remember versus having something complicated.
Well, and that's it. The complication piece of the bigger that the words and or phrases are, and then the changing of capitals versus lowercase, uppercase, special characters like ampersands, pound signs, exclamation points, all very important, because what that allows you to do is interchange them. So even if the phrase got guessed, because there are certain symbols in there, it's difficult to do. And
absolutely.
And then the passphrases, because it is a phrase, sometimes easier to remember.
Yes.
So, like, I hate my dog Black Spot,
right.
And I've changed Spot and Black and a bunch of different things in there with ampersands and exclamation points and hashtags or whatever. And so the interesting thing about that is because it is more complex, and so even for things like the password to your Wi-Fi network in your house.
That's right, the router.
Making those kinds of passphrases easy to remember, complex enough that a hacker could take longer for them to compromise.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And again, Stephanie, it's a good point you made. So individuals at your home, you have your router. Now there's a password there as well. And that password on your router is like the traffic cop at your home, giving you access, that is, to the internet. And you need to make sure that you have a proper passphrase set up on your router, something that your family can remember, that's easy for you to remember, but makes it more difficult for the hackers. For sure. Also, a friend of mine in the studio wanted to utilize a device to connect to the internet from a third party. They wasn't sure of how it should work. And this third party wanted to use this device to connect to internet from his singular router within his organization, right? The recommendation is not to use that particular third-party device that he doesn't know to connect to his main router. The idea is to have either a dual band router or having a different router. We call it DMZ, right? The type of a DMZ approach, as we call it in the cybersecurity world, that would isolate that particular third-party device from his main router.
Yeah, and what you see with third parties, and you see this in organizations, but it's no different than allowing an individual to bring a device into your home and put it on your network, is you don't know what viruses, what code, or what things are attached to that device.
Absolutely.
And so the challenge is when you let that alien device, if you will.
Alien device, that's a good term for it.
You don't know what it's got on it. You don't know where it came from.
Right.
Shows up on your network. It could actually infiltrate your network, expose data, exfiltrate data, create denial of service attacks on there.
Absolutely. Man-in-the-middle attacks, all of that.
All of those kinds of things.
Yep.
So having that demilitarized zone, DMZ, having that area where it's a space that's not on your trusted network, it's one step away, but it's not out on the internet either, gives you that safe space, because there's a firewall between your network and what's happening in that zone that you've let those alien or unknown equipment attached to.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point, Stephanie. And for those of you who are individuals not sure what we're speaking of here, let me explain it to you a different way. Let's say you're at your house, one of your children's friends wants to come by and use your network. They bring in their laptop and they ask the family for the network password. If you only have one router in your home, you give that child access to that network's password. Now that child has access to your whole entire operation of your home, including your IoT devices, your security systems, and all of it. And in turn, that friend is not a friend of your child's anymore. When you guys are out of town, they can ride their bikes in front of your house.
Or driving.
or drive, and have access to your network and have access to your home and your security. So that's why it's important to have either a dual band or an additional router that your children are utilizing for their school, for that information that's totally separate from your home's main network. It's very, very important to do that. So think about that. And if you don't, not sure how to set that up or how that works, you can contact my company, Vanderson Cyber Group, and we'll give you a consulting about how to set that up and create a policy for you within your home as well as your business. Stephanie, this has been very, very fun. I very much appreciate you joining us here with this information.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Do this again.
Absolutely.
Yes, definitely we'll have Stephanie back again. We're going to talk about other cybersecurity incidents throughout the entire year. I'll bring Stephanie back as a guest Her and I both are working on our doctoral degree. I'm just proud to say that, and I wanted her proud of her too. And we're both going to be doctors here in cybersecurity assurance from Capella University. Matter of fact, we're going to put our school out there. There we go. So, folks, I want to thank you for joining us here this week. And again, you can reach me at Venderson Cyber Group at macjacksonjr.com. That's macjacksonjr.com. You can find me all over social media, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter as well. So we'll be here, folks, next week on here on Cybersecurity Awareness. Until then, folks, like I say every week, hashtag stay cyber woke. See you then, folks. Thank you.
You